Hi, it's Hazel, and welcome to my channel, Hazel Anaka Design. This is going to be a short video showing how I saw something, namely this little fabric envelope in this came along from Sandy, aka Wilhelmina, with that journal that I got from her. And I thought it was so cute, and of course she stuffed some ephemera into it. I should just quickly pull out a ruler so you get an idea of size. Whoops. So it's about 4.5 by 3. Anyway, it was so darn cute, but I don't know, maybe I must be spatially delayed. Is that the politically correct way to say it? I looked at this and I thought, okay, how do I make it? How do I make it? How do I make it? Couldn't figure the darn thing out. So I had to remove the stitching and discover that I was sure it started out as a square, but of course was too dense to notice that it was a square that was folded into a triangle. Anyway, this is some sort of old, worn, shabby little ditzy print. So I have a lot of fabric, as I'm sure you do too. And I thought, okay, why don't I make some? So I did not waste time looking for the fancy, danciest stuff I might have. I looked in one particular drawer, saw some stuff that I hadn't seen in years, and thought, okay, I can make this work. If you have already guessed that this came from a tea towel, well, pat yourself on the back. And I made several. So now these kind of almost seem spring-loaded in a way that, so I don't know what the answer is. Maybe with time, I haven't ironed them. I must say that doing the top stitching around has made them lie down a lot, look a lot better than when I just had them folded. Anyway, I got several out of this particular one tea towel with not a great deal left. I guess I have a couple of pieces like this that obviously could be cut smaller and become the base for a cluster. And you can see, now the issue here, okay, so I'm assuming that you love this look and maybe want to try not try, but to do some of these yourself. So, as I said, I didn't spend half a day deciding which fabrics, but there are some considerations. Now, because the stitching is done, okay, usually I would start back here or down here where these two things overlap. So I would go around. Now that is going to, at some point, prevent the fraying from going any further. So what you might want to consider is the amount of fraying that is possible. These parts here are not stitched. So again, we're not making stuff to put in the archive somewhere. So longevity probably isn't that big a concern. This is, at this point too, your sewing machine is going to be sewing through 4 layers. So keep that in mind. When my sewing machine started grumbling and almost, banging, I thought, oh, I guess that is a pretty vocal cue that I should have changed my needle. So I did change the needle, put it in a new size 14 at some point. As I said, these guys are different sizes, and that was just in order to try to maximize the amount of fabric that I had. Now, I didn't use a quilter square and a cutter or anything. I just used the grid on my table here and tore, like ripped the fabric. And I obviously measured. However, let me say that that is easier said than done, because, and it's the same thing here. These two edges don't line up. But again, is that a big concern? It isn't. If a person wanted a more precise, a more, well, let me start that again. If you chose, and I did use other fabric, if you chose a different sort of fabric that was perhaps not as shabby looking, then precision might be the way to go. I thought that this was going to be a good choice. I've had this fabric for years and years and years. It's neutral. These things could be, decorated up if a person was so inclined. And I thought, this is going to lie so beautifully. Well, it was when I was sewing this stuff, not these thick tea towel ones, and this is old, thrifted, had been washed a million times. But I think this is so densely woven that the needle seemed to have a hard time getting through. There was a certain amount of, banging and vibration even with the new needle. And I did keep these strips. And you may be wondering, well, why do you have these strips? Well, I'll tell you that when I folded this square in half to get a triangular shape, quite often the edges didn't line up. Now these are looking pretty darn good now, but in some cases, I was out 1/4 of an inch in the measurement. Also had a bit of an issue with the sewing machine. You know how that likes to happen every so often. Maybe it wasn't on this one. And this is kind of not so good here. So this, I think, I will save this as my little prototype. But these are really cute. I think my smallest square was 7 inches, and my biggest was 10 inches. So, you can kind of judge accordingly, or you can, cut it to maximize the fabric that you have. I did one of these, which I think looks pretty darn snazzy. And I have to say, this top stitching, which also serves the purpose of keeping this thing closed and together, really seems to flatten the fabric out, because when they were folded, it looked pretty bulky. And the only place I pinned was here during this, at this intersection where the two tabs come together. And I also did one of these. No, I didn't. I thought I had grabbed all the threads that were coming off. Again, if a person is concerned about that, I guess think about it in your fabric selection. Now, I already put it away, but there was one that I was hoping I would be able to use. But honestly, it was so frayed and so slippery that I thought, oh, I'm just asking for trouble. Save it for some other purpose. So I just want to show you what something that wasn't properly cut in the first place, the problem it creates. Okay, so I thought, well, I've cut, and you can, visually you can see that this isn't square, and it's no wonder when I go to fold it that I've got something like that going on. So what I discovered was that, yes, my measurements were good on the two tears that I made, but the initial side wasn't cut straight. So I pulled some of the threads, and that was a thing that we learned in home ec, that if you pull a thread, let me just show you. I have no idea if this is warp or weft, but anyway, if you pull a thread, not that one, probably this one, and it, you know, it works better than on some fabrics than on others. Quite often this action would cause the thread to break. And if you just sort of gently ease it, you can see that this thread that I'm pulling out is giving me the straight grain and the proper place to cut. So I wanted to show you that. That's why I didn't sew this one together. And honestly, it's worth the effort. I don't know why these scissors seem to cut so poorly sometimes. They've never been used on paper. Anyway, I'm just cutting. I know you can't see a darn thing. I'm just cutting down that guideline now that the missing thread is created. Anyway, I was saying it makes good sense to get your piece of fabric as square as possible before you start, because it'll create nothing but grief. It still may not be perfect because, you know, sometimes fabric goes out of square. Sometimes you can try doing that as a way to, you know, oh dear, that wasn't supposed to happen, as a way to try to straighten it out if it's just a matter of it being stretched. So essentially you make a triangle and then fold. It doesn't matter if you go left over right or right over left. You want there to be, I think on Sandy's, there was about maybe 1.25 inches or so. You know, you kind of want, without having to pull out some kind of heavy-duty measuring devices or protractors or whatever, you kind of want it to be symmetrical because, you know, if I did something like this, obviously that's, so I've just kind of was eyeballing it, trying to get it as much, you just play with it a bit. Oh, I didn't bring this pin cushion back. Oh, pin it and then stitch around it. And of course, if you know, like with all things in the studio, if you get a bunch of fabrics ready and then do all your sewing at once, it seems to be more, you feel more efficient. And if you pick colors where you don't have to change your thread, you save even more time. So I have this neat little stack. Like I said, I will put this guy into my prototypes, and these others will just hopefully relax and settle down, and hopefully I will be inclined to use them and tuck a few goodies in. And I think it's a great way, frankly, to use up some fabric, because, you know, we can make ruffles and we can make shabby ribbon, but sometimes, you know, you need to do a lot of that to use up any amount of fabric. But at 10 by 10, say, or a person could go bigger, you know, 12 by 12, like a square foot, you could work your way through some sizable scraps that way. Now, I think it would be cute, you know, a person could put those little Velcro dots there, or hand sew snaps on there, just do a decorative button, like even the weight of a button would hold that down a bit better. I haven't ironed any of these things before or after the project, but anyway, I think they're a really smart idea. So I just want to thank Sandy again for including this. And it just goes to show that we don't have to, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. If we see a good idea, sometimes you maybe need to deconstruct it, but it is, everything is fair game, and we can just use it to our advantage. Anyway, guys, that is all I have for you today. So I hope that you're inclined to look at your scraps in a new way. Again, just be aware of the slipperiness, let's say, of the fabric, the amount of fraying. What else? It's probably, I would say that a more complex pattern is going to hide more sins. And of course, there are I could have picked a navy blue. I could have picked one of the shades of pink here. I didn't want to keep changing my thread. So you have ways to personalize these and make them more fun, just also in your thread choice. Anyway, guys, I hope you give this a try, because they're fun, and I think they're going to come in very handy. So anyway, thanks. If you're liking the content, please consider subscribing. I'm pleasantly surprised with kind of the slow and steady, well, maybe not so thrilled with the slow part, but the steady growth in my subscribers. And I think it should be doable to hit 1,500 before the end of the year. So please consider subscribing. There is no cost or obligation to you, and it definitely helps me. Of course, likes and comments are so gratifying to a creator. So I urge you to take that extra minute or so to express how you feel about whatever it is that you're seeing, and know that I read everyone and that I respond to everyone. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.